Gig Gab, episode 457 for Monday, November 25th, National Parfait Day 2024. And that's our first little sound issue for today. We don't have theme music. That's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. I don't know why that would happen. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, that's where it should go. Huh. I don't like that. Normally I wouldn't care, but this would be indicative of
something not working
potentially.
right.
Yeah, exactly. Give me 10 seconds here to see if I can
Take
figure
your
this
time.
out. Yeah, that is not happening. All right, let's try that again. There we go. Huh. You heard that, I presume?
I did, yes.
Yeah. That is bothersome. Okay. I don't know why that. Huh. Okay. Sure. Sure.
Sure. Should we try again?
No, we're definitely going to try again. Oh, yeah. I just, it makes me ask the question, what else is not as it should be? That's the only part. And I know you know what I'm talking about when I
do.
say that.
Very much.
So we're going to go ahead and start the show again. But yeah, what? And if I do the theme music, I see, yeah, I have signal everywhere. Everything's fine. We're going to assume that. I can't believe I'm saying this. We're going to assume that was the only problem that was happening.
That's going to be it. That was our one time.
That's the one. Let's try this again. Gig Gab, episode 457 for Monday, November 25th, National Parfait Day 2024. Greetings, folks, and welcome to Gig Gab, the show by, for, and about working musicians here, as usual, in Durham, New Hampshire. I'm Dave Hamilton, and today I've got somebody with me as our guest co-host that has been, and I think I've got this right, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, and that'll make for an interesting conversation. Recording engineer for folks like Joe Walsh and Sheryl Crow, Andy Summers, front of house for people from Justin Bieber to these days out on tour with Iron Maiden and many, many, many others in between, and an educator at his core with his own series of classes. Pooch, thank you so much for taking your time today to join us.
Hey, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I presume at least most of the things that I said about you there are true.
They are, yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. If they weren't, we'd still have a conversation. It'd be fun.
No, I mean, yeah. No, I've been very blessed in my who I've gotten to work for and in my career,
Yeah.
So I've been super lucky to work with some really great people.
Yeah, and you started in the recording world and moved to live sound. Is that correct?
That is. So I went to Berkeley College of Music, and I studied music production and engineering there. Graduated in 1991 and moved to Los Angeles and started as a music producer, recording engineer. And I thought that was going to be my career. And I loved it, and I did it for about 3 years, and had a really blossoming career going on. I got nominated for a few Grammys, and
Wow,
and in that short amount of time, and so it was really great. But it was also a time before Pro Tools, and so it was tape. And it was punching guitar parts over and over again for an entire day, the same 4 bars.
Yep.
Not like what we do now. And I found myself, working crazy 80-hour weeks and 90-hour weeks, and just being locked in a room with no windows.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to get like, let me look around and see what other opportunities there are in this industry, and kind of just fell into live sound,
Interesting.
and haven't really looked back since.
Huh. All right. Oh, so it was it wasn't that somebody just called you and said, "Hey, I know you're in the studio, but could you come do sound for me?" This was you started kind of hanging your shingle in the live sound world.
No, actually, it is as you just described. I I happen to be working with a hair metal band called Warrant,
Oh yeah.
and we were doing some demos in the studio for their next record. And they had fired their front of house guy the night before, and literally while we're working in the studio, they said, hey, we fired our front of house guy. Why don't you come and mix our live sound? And I kind of got taken aback and said, I don't know anything about live sound. Like, I played live as a musician,
Okay. Yeah.
but I'd never ever mixed anything, been a live sound guy at all. And I found myself the next evening opening up for Rat at the LA Forum.
What?
Yeah.
Well, talk
So,
about trial by fire, man. I mean,
oh
not
my,
that you didn't know it. You knew what the console looked like, but still, like,
I kind of did. I mean, it was,
yeah.
I knew, of course, all of the basics of gain structure and how a console works, and all that kind of stuff. But it was a live sound console, so
Yeah.
very, very different than what I was used to. Um, and it was a really interesting experience. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating in that I'm like, I think I found what I love. Like, this is unbelievable. Like, 10,000 people screaming for something that I'm a part of this is better than any drug. Like, I love this, this thing. So, it really, like, I immediately knew that, that's where I wanted to be, and that's what I wanted to do. And I'm blessed that it finally, it just happened that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But it was terrifying. Let me just tell you, that whole day, I kind of, was sick to my stomach going, I don't know what I'm doing here, guys. But luckily, the guys that were, like the system engineer kind of people, and the guys that worked for the sound company were very, very nice, helped me work through it.
So
This
this
is the
was like
time.
these were like the folks that set up the system that they rented
Correct.
the system from. Okay, and
Correct.
you were and the Warrant was opening for Rat, so there was a lot of infrastructure provided for you by the Rat team, I would assume.
Correct. So, and it was only, they played for half an hour or something,
Sure.
it wasn't like I had to
Yeah.
sit there for 2 hours, like trying to figure it out. So it went by quick, and and actually that was one of the things that I first loved about live sound, was that accidents happen, guitar players play wrong notes, whatever, but it goes by and no one noticed, no one remembers that those things happened. Whereas as a music producer and as a recording engineer, you make a mistake on tape, it's always there until you fix it. And so you may spend an entire day listening to the same mistake over and over again until you get to a point where you can fix it. And so I really liked that whole thing of people's memories not remembering a huge disaster that just happened 2 songs ago, because the song that they're hearing right now is really great.
Yeah, and as I mean, I do some sound as well, but as a musician who plays out, I rely on that knowledge
Totally.
all freaking night. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
all right,
yeah.
well, that's the beauty of live art, is
It
that
is.
it is an evolving thing, and mistakes do happen. And I always say this, unlike being on like a soccer team or a football team or some sporting event where you likely have half the people rooting against you, with live music, everyone is rooting for you until you tell them otherwise.
Totally.
Like, so everybody's on your side. There's a mistake. Great. Can they recover from it?
Can
Yes.
they recover? Yeah. I know.
And everybody's there. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, your point about being terrified and also noticing that you enjoyed it, those are the opportunities in life, right? That like those are the moments where you're like, okay,
pivotal moment.
Pivotal.
Pivotal moment. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's
Changed my life. It changed the course
right.
of what I thought I was headed for. And no, absolutely no regrets. 35 years later or whatever, I'm like, yeah, whatever.
That's awesome.
I made the right choice,
That's
So
outstanding. That's
yeah.
outstanding. Yeah. Yeah. I have a million things I could ask about that. But they'd probably all be just minutia. But I am curious that first, is there one thing that stood out other than the being terrified and it being over in a blur? And yet I'm sure there were moments that felt like they were moving at a snail's pace as well. Is there one thing that you learned from that other than this is going to be your career, but is there a technical thing that happened during that first day, that first live show that you still carry with you? Is there anything that sort of stuck with you on that?
I think so. I mean, live sound was very different in 1992.
Sure. Yeah.
Literally we were high-fiving when you could hear the vocal all night long. That's what live sound was.
Yeah. It's true.
Now it's record quality with impact is what I call it now. And so it's really interesting. My career's kind of come full circle because speaker technology is so good now that it's almost like a very large pair of near field monitors, which is where I started, right? So now it's come full circle for me, and I identify with what's happening now in live sound much more than I did back then, which was, holy crap, my only job in life is to make sure that the vocal's intelligible. You know what I mean? Like
That's it.
everything else is
I mean,
like,
that's still the prime
crazy.
directive.
It is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And that's my point is I'm trying to get across is that's what I learned is that's the most important thing. It's now where we make a record quality mix with impact, but still the number one thing is making sure the vocal is heard in all cases, in between songs, during songs. Intelligibility is the number one thing. That's what people care about.
The vast majority of folks at a show, even the folks who are there to hear the music, if the vocals are unintelligible, they're going to be upset too. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
And in between songs, when the artist is speaking to the crowd, like I see shows at festivals where guys kind of have it when the guys and gals kind of have it when the singer is singing, but in between songs when they're talking kind of low and you don't understand what they're saying, that bums people out. They want to hear every single thing that lead singer has to say. And that's an important part of being a live sound guy. So I would say that's what I took from it.
That makes sense. All right. So what are your tricks for making sure that people can hear the in between song stuff? What's your sort of default approach to that?
Yeah. So, wow, that's a really interesting question. There's no real trick to it. What there is though is making sure that there's obviously no feedback issues, that certain frequencies aren't poking out, that it's a smooth sounding vocal. The problem is that lately in the last, I'd say 10 years, every artist is now putting themselves in front of a PA by building a thrust or building some sort of thing, I mean, just look at the last like Taylor Swift thing. She's standing in front of the PA for 99% of the show.
Right. Yeah, she's farther out from the PA than half the audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that physics-wise is difficult. Having a microphone in front of speakers is very hard. There's some tools that we use. There are certain plugins that we use. There's one called PSE that's made by Waves. It's called Primary Source Expander. It was based on a Neve unit called a 5045. And basically what it is a vocal gate, for lack of a better term, and kind of breaks up any sort of feedback from happening in between when the artist is not speaking. So it
Oh,
basically mutes the microphone when the person isn't saying something, but it's so quick and it knows exactly. We're going to get into a whole other thing, but there's this thing.
get into it. We
Yeah.
get nerdy here. Listen,
Okay. Cool.
I tell our guests and our audience hears me say this often enough that they know it too. The stories that absolutely would put people to sleep at your neighborhood cocktail parties are exactly the kind of things we want to talk about here. We are that kind of nerds. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the primary source expander, what you just brought up.
Yeah.
What it does is it's something called a look ahead plugin. And a look ahead plugin is a plugin that has a little bit of latency
intentional latency.
Intentional latency latencycy because as information comes to the plugin, it is actually looking ahead to see if there's information there, or if there's any sort of
feedback or whatever,
and makes a determination as to when to open the game. So, here's a source coming along. It sees that source and it says, this is speaking, and therefore, when that source gets to the plugin, I'm going to open right away. And what that means is when we're talking like right now, in between me, the words I just said, it mutes. It's quick enough to catch mutes like that. And what that does is prevent any sort of feedback thing. And especially when an artist takes a microphone and moves it away from themselves and points it at the speakers, which happens a lot.
Sure.
It takes care of that. It mutes that. And
Now, do you have this plugin active full time, or do you only kick it in between songs?
Full time.
Full time. Okay, so it's that fast. Okay,
it is. However, it is part of snapshots in my console that its threshold gets adjusted for speaking and singing. So there are different thresholds based upon the singer. If it's a quiet song, the threshold gets adjusted. If they're speaking, it gets adjusted. So there are some stuff that moves, but
sure.
But it is on the entire time for sure.
Wow, interesting. And how much latency does it require to get its job done?
I don't know the exact tech specs, but it's not much. It's like, when we're talking about latency, especially when we're talking about in-ear monitors, so that people that have to play with each other with in-ear monitors in. So the monitor mixer, which is not what I am. I'm a front of house mixer, but
right. But still, everybody's part of it. The hip joint's connected to the thigh bone. So yep,
totally. The maximum amount of latency before you start having musicians start to like go, whoa, this sounds very strange, is about 4 milliseconds. So there's a lot of time there. 4 milliseconds may sound very fast to you, but in the world of live sound, that's a big amount of time. Like if you're allowed to work within that 4 milliseconds, that you can do a lot of things that have little bits of latency along the way.
Yeah.
Now, when we're talking front of house sound, we speak in 20 millisecond chunks.
Sure.
Because we're doing things like adjusting speakers to be in time with each other, in physical time with each other. So there are times where we are literally adjusting a speaker stack by 18, 20 milliseconds in order for them to be in time with each other. So having a plugin that is less than a millisecond, definitely less than a millisecond worth of latency, it's not a big deal to me. Like, I'm like,
sure, you don't care.
Right, don't care much. It's monitor guys that really pay attention to that kind of thing.
No, that makes sense. During my podcast setup has evolved over the last 20 years, obviously, as technology has. And it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I moved from USB. I had gone FireWire, then USB, and then moved to Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
And I listen to what I would call the third head here. So I'm hearing us past any effects, past mix, post mix, because I want to know that what's being recorded is going to sound good. And
Sure.
because of that, I've gotten used to hearing myself on more of a delay than most people are used to. It didn't take much. It's not a huge delay.
No, but
when
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
When I moved from USB to Thunderbolt, I had to artificially add delay in and wean myself off because it was too fast. It was
That's great.
yeah. But
Yeah.
now I don't want to go back. Now it's the Personas replaced or updated I use a Quantum 2626, which is the Thunderbolt, and they've got the HD8, which is its predecessor, but USB, and it's like, well, it's great. But
this is pretty great.
But this is funny. Even better.
I have my own equipment. I purchased all of my own equipment, so I rent my front of house back to the
gig,
to any band that I work for.
Sure.
But what's in there are 6 Mac Minis that are from 2012, right? And they're still working. They still are great.
They're Intel.
They still do. Yeah.
Yeah.
They still do everything that I want them to do, but I do notice, like when I'm working on my laptop, which is an M2 chip, and then I go back to a Mac Mini, I'm like, man, this is so slow. Like, it's so weird how we adapt to speed.
Yes. And once you make that adjustment, going back is like unfathomable. Yeah. Even though 2012. They were fine for you. In fact, they were the fastest thing you could get. But those new Mac Minis that just came out.
Oh man,
dude,
I know.
Dude, that's great.
I'm at the end of life of these 2012. So
I would say they don't owe you anything. Yeah.
No, not a thing. I mean, they've traveled all over the world for however long that is.
Amazing.
12 years. So
yeah. So what else is in like what are those Mac Minis feeding, and like what's the rest of your preferred setup when you can bring your own thing and you're not just having to fly out and immediately like be dropped into whatever?
Yeah, cool. I mean, listen, in studio land, I lived the whole analog to digital thing.
Sure.
That happened around 1993, 4. And I remember them rolling in the first Mitsubishi X850 32-track digital machine, and putting it next to our 24-track, Studer, and a bunch of us stood around it, looking like cavemen looking at a rocket ship, like, what is this thing, and I did that again in live sound when I started in live sound. Live sound is about 10 years behind studio stuff.
Yeah, because it's real time. It's got to be it's got to work, and you're beating the crap out of it every night. Yeah.
It's got to work. When studio guys, they go and take go get a coffee when something breaks. For us, it's like, man, there's 25,000, 80,000 people waiting for you to figure this out.
Yeah.
And
they're not patient.
No.
No. In fact, they paid. Yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, just recently in an Iron Maiden show, we had a piece of gear fail, and the downbeat of the show was no PA for, I think it was about 30 seconds, but it felt like a year and a half.
That's a long time.
Yeah. And it's me at front of house going, what is happening? What is happening? My other 2 guys that work with me, scanning, trying to determine what the piece of gear is. Oh, it's that. Pop that out. Okay, it takes that long. It takes 30 seconds to figure out what is happening. Why isn't anything working? Anyway, it turned out to be a piece of gear that was inserted on the band bus. And so that piece of gear died. And once I figured that out, you take the insert out and boom, hey, there's the band. But yeah, so stuff happens. But
it does.
To your point that, hey man, our stuff has to work, because when 20,000 people are staring at you, it's
there's a schedule.
Ugly. It's ugly.
Yeah.
Luckily, everybody was cool. The band was cool. And, 30 seconds isn't that long. It wasn't like people were going, I'm going to go get a beer while they try to fix us.
Right.
So that's good.
But still, that is an energy change. I mean, from the start 100%. Of a concert, that's very different than it happening in the middle of the show. So, yep.
Totally is.
It's a
Totally
bummer,
is.
but it's live art. That's how it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's been there's been several times in my career where stuff has died or I made a mistake. I mean,
Yes.
um, there used to be Avid, previously was Pro Tools had a or previously was Digidesign had a desk that they made for live sound called the Venue Desk
Yep.
and Profile, and I had a Profile, and one of the things that you had to watch out for was in order to instantiate a plugin, in order to have a new plugin, it actually did a full audio mute, a full system audio mute in order to instantiate a plugin.
Huh.
So you had to have the plugins that you wanted to use instantiated in order for that to work during the show. And that was fine. And Digidesign made a big red blinking button that when you instantiate a plugin, it's basically blinking, sitting there going, don't do this. It's going to mute everything.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Sure.
Well, what do you think this dumb butt did in the middle of a show? Right?
Really?
Hit the
Yeah.
blinking red button and went, I'm instantiated. I mean, I don't know where my brain was. It was just gone. My brain was shut down. And it was, again, another like 30 seconds in the middle of a
Yeah.
Lincoln Park show. And it just felt like every person in that arena was staring at me. I was just like, and I knew immediately.
And there's nothing you can, that's not even like I can work to look like I'm hunting for what the problem is. You knew what the problem was probably about 100 milliseconds before your finger finished pressing that button. Yep.
That's exactly right. Like I did it and I knew exactly what happened. And I was like, oh, this is going to be the longest 30 seconds of my life right now.
Yeah. It's like on your iPhone when you go to push a thing at the top of the screen and a notification slides in as your finger is coming down on it.
Yes.
And you know that you're going to tap the notification because you can't stop it, but you see it happen. Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, so there's been times, listen, I'm a human. I make mistakes.
Of course.
And I literally, the band wanted to see me after the show and because they knew it happened, whatever. And I just walked in and I said, listen, there's 1,000 knobs and buttons on this console. I pressed the wrong one. I made the mistake. I'm sorry. And they just laughed and said, okay, cool. At least you owned it. And I said, yeah.
Of course.
So anyway, but hey, if I'd done that again, I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah,
you get one. Right?
Everybody gets one.
Time. Yeah,
that's right. Everybody. I always say mistakes are tuition. That's how I justify paying for them. Yep, because I make plenty. But yeah, interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, back to my gear. If you want to talk about that, I came into the digital realm, and I really feel like, and this is going to be a controversial thing to say, but I feel like only in the last 5 years has digital audio really come to a place where I'm kind of over, like, I don't need an analog console. I'm kind of over it. The digital console does so many things as far as snapshot technology and allowing me to be way more creative than I ever could be on an analog desk. To me, that only really happened about 5 years ago, which is interesting because it's probably been in live sound digital audio, I don't know, 15 years maybe.
At least. I mean, those of us in like weekend warrior bands have had access to that tech for probably 15 years, right? I mean, Mackey's DL1608 was probably I think it was the first that we had, like at a prosumer level kind of thing. So my guess is you had it maybe 5 years before that. Yeah. Or had access to it, I should say. Yeah.
And I used the technology. I still used it when it first came out.
Sure.
But I also knew that we could do better. And we have, and luckily there's been, lots of advances in processing and, all those kind of things that allow for, lower latency times. So better processing, higher, sample rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, my gear is I use a Digico Quantum 7, which is it used to be their flagship. Now they have a newer console called an 852.
Of course.
So I have that desk, which is excellent. And I mainly use Waves plugins because in live sound, the host that is compatible with most live sound desks is a thing called Super Rack that was built by Waves.
Yep.
So currently, they just opened the architecture so that you can have other manufacturers' plugins. That just happened about 4 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember seeing that. Yeah.
So that's good news for all of us live sound guys, because now we get to use some of those plugins that we were kind of missing. There's some other manufacturers' plugins that are really fantastic.
Yeah, sure.
But I have a relationship with Waves and had for a long, long time. So I'm cool with having only Waves plugins at the moment, and that's what I've been using. And then I have a few analog pieces that are specific to. I can't find a plugin that does the same thing. And usually, for
example, yeah.
So what most of those are things that do harmonic distortion and pleasing analog to be things that is really, really hard to replicate as a piece of software.
It is.
So I use a thing called a Creamliner. It's a company called Sonic Farm. And it is basically just a tube distortion maker, but not distortion like you think of as in a guitar amp. It turns out that certain amounts of distortion, even up to 20% total harmonic distortion, is pleasing to a human ear.
Really?
And different types of distortion have been found to be you play someone without that device that makes a little bit of that distortion, and they go, "Oh yeah, it sounds great." And then you add distortion, which is really kind of counterintuitive.
Sure.
You would think you don't want distortion; it's not going to sound great. But it's actually really interesting. You put that device on something, and I would say 99.9% of the people standing around would be like, "Whoa, oh, okay, yeah, that's better."
Huh.
And it does it's a felt thing and it's a heard thing. It is definitely heard, like you can hear it.
Yeah.
But it is subtle. But I use it on my mix bus, and so it's subtle
to kind of glue everything together.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's subtle, but it's also like I'll pop it in and out. Like I'll say to people like, "Yeah, that's my little secret weapon over there." You know? And you put it in bypass, and everyone goes, "Oh, huh." And then you put it back in, and they go, "Oh, okay." There's none of this like people going, "I didn't really hear anything. I don't know what you're talking about." It's like everybody goes, "Oh yeah, that's definitely better. What's happening?"
No, I mean, I'm trying to cogitate about why this would be, and it's got to be if it's noticeable to the vast majority of people, as you say, and obviously I believe you, then there's got to be something in nature that makes us more comfortable when we hear harmonic distortion. And I mean, if you think about it, there's harmonic distortion everywhere. It's happening. There's reflections happening. And
that's right.
You don't get sound. It's rare that you are in a natural environment that is even approximating being anechoic, right? And so
yes.
I'm, and this is just me being Dave, but I think that makes sense what you're saying here. Now that you say, I never would have thought about this, but now that you say it, it's like, well, okay, like there's reflections and absorption and all of these things that are happening, and multiple sound sources in nature happening simultaneously. In fact, that is the norm. And so, of course, we would be tuned to be less in, fight or flight mode when things are normal. And so I could see that. Yeah. All right.
That's great. That's a really accurate description. I've thought about this a lot. Like, why is this work? And by no means am I like the right guy tech wise to
Neither
tell you
one of us are, but we'll do it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So take this with a grain of salt. This is my thought process behind it. But, I find digital signal sometimes to be a little bit harsh to the human ear. And I don't know that is because of sample rate, an interpolation. I mean, we could get in a whole discussion about how digital audio works, but there's something to that if you round off some of the sampling that's happening and make it be, I don't even know how to say it, like less harsh.
Yeah.
And therefore be causing distortion. My theory is that some of this is related to oversampling and the fact that there are interpolation points that are above hearing, right? So when you're talking about a 92 kilohertz sampling rate, it's 92 points in a sine wave. The in between things are guesses. Man, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. We'll be talking here for 3 hours, but
go a little bit, and then we'll detour somewhere else. Yeah.
So you have a sine wave, right? And in an analog sine wave, it is well defined as to completely where the curves are of this sine wave.
There's nothing missing from it.
Nothing missing. When you are digitally sampling a sine wave, depending on. It doesn't matter the sample rate. There's always a space in between the samples.
Yes.
So whether it's 192 kilohertz sample rate, 96, 48, whatever, there is always a space in between the two sample rates that is like, well, this one's here, this one's here. We're going to guess that in between that is a line that goes this way, just straight.
Yeah.
So in reality, there's a whole lot of guessing going on there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I can't think that that's not affecting sound a little bit, right? Like it's doing things to sound that is a little bit not real, right?
Not natural. Yes, it is unnatural because straight lines don't exist in nature. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess that's a better word for it, is unnatural.
Yeah.
Now, is it an accurate description of that sine wave? Yes, absolutely. 100%. The higher sample rate that you have, the less of those guesses,
it's lossless. The defense stipulates. Yeah.
You get to a point where the propeller heads will argue with you that it is an exact representation of that sine wave.
Sure.
Okay, cool. But I think that, and by no means, listen, I'm not I am lucky to be where I am. And I'll tell you my theory, the reason I am where I am is not because I have this monstrous, unbelievable, golden ears. Absolutely not. The reason I am where I am and the reason that I can work with the artists that I work with are because my ears happen to be right down the middle of what everyone else's ears are. The extreme right, let's say, that thinks something is really bright, or extreme left thinks that something is really dark. My ears happen to be kind of like everybody else's, the majority of people's. And so when I'm mixing, and I'm mixing for myself and making things not hurt for me, I'm doing that for the vast majority of the people. That's my theory of that.
It pays to have average ears.
100%.
It does. That makes a lot of sense. Because it bell curves being what they are, most people are going to be in the middle, and if you can get the sound there, then yeah. And I would also venture to guess that another, perhaps even larger factor in your success has nothing to do with your ears and has everything to do with your willingness to show up, do the job, and be a decent hang most of the time.
100%. There is that. That is 90% of my job is people skills, right?
Yeah.
And navigating and being really a psychiatrist, like, analyzing the situation and making decisions. Because I work with crazy people. I mean, let's face it, musicians
Sure.
are crazy, most of them. And if they've gotten to a point where they are in the people that I get to work with, there's a little bit wrong going on there.
Yeah.
And also if they're people, like Iron Maiden, for example, they got big when they were 18 years old, and it's 45 years later now. They've had a life of being this huge rock stars for 45 years. They don't go to Starbucks and get coffee for themselves, right?
Right.
There's an assistant that goes and gets it, or whatever. So their lives are vastly different than mine. So my job as a front of house guy and as a sound guy is to put myself in their shoes and try to understand where they come from in their lives when interpreting what they're saying to you. So as a sound guy, I spend a great deal of time, and it's a skill that you can develop. And I have honed it well enough to walk into a room with 5 different people and in a short amount of time assess what the needs are of all of those 5 people, what they need from me, like what they're looking for from me when I walk into that room. And that's a skill. And that is why I am where I am, not my ears.
Makes
100%.
perfect sense. Of course.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. And that ability to get along with people and suss out what people need and perhaps even more importantly, don't need from you.
Yes.
Is just as important with, I'll call them sidemen, the side people, musicians, that not the star, the people
Right.
that are being hired to be on stage with the star, but it's their gig, not yours.
Yes.
That
Yes.
the hang is and being able to shut your mouth when you need to and listen and all those things. It's super important. I mean, listen, it's super important in life in general. Some people need to employ it to keep their jobs more than others.
Indeed. My advice to any young, new sound person, lighting person, anybody in this business starting out is study some psychology. Like go get some books about Psychology 101, because it truly is a skill that you need to hone and develop. Now, on top of that, listen, I have to deliver. I mean, it's not just that, right? Like,
Of course.
In the end, I have to deliver something that's good. Now,
that's
where
table stakes, though.
yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
But here's
it's super important. Yeah.
Here's where I get sad when I'm educating and I have a room full of people, and I see a kid that is doing all the right things, working their butt off, studying, learning things, learning gear, coming to places to learn from people, absorbing all that information. But they just don't have that thing. I recognize for me, a large portion of where I am is not something that I developed as a skill. It's something that I believe was given to me. Like, whether you're religious or not, whatever, I happen to believe it was God given to me. Just like there's a million guitar players, but there's only one Eddie Van Halen. And the reason there's only one Eddie Van Halen is not because he sat there and practiced in his room every day. It's because he has something, or had something in him that made him who he was, right? And I think that's true for world-class engineers as well. Just as there are talented guitar players that don't ever get a chance, there are also, your whatever, name any guitar player, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Joe
Sure.
Walsh, any of those. The reason they get where they are is because they have this thing, and it's intangible.
The X
You don't
factor.
know what it is.
Absolutely.
It's the X factor. And
Yeah.
this is true of engineers. And there are times when I'm educating where I will be in the middle of a mix, and then I will do something that all of a sudden the mix is great. And the entire room kind of looks around and goes, whoa, what did you just do? And I tell them what I did. And then the next question is, how did you know to do that?
That's the question.
And my answer is, I don't know.
Yep.
Because there are just some things that, I've been blessed with this thing that's like, and listen, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be like, I'm this fucking, whatever.
Yeah.
World class, I don't mean that. What I'm saying is that I recognize that there's something that was given to me, a gift that was given to me that is the hardest thing as an educator to see when you don't see it in someone that wants it really bad.
Absolutely. But what I will say is that phrase, the how did you know to do that phrase, that's one of those phrases to look out for in your life. Because when someone says that to you, stop and think about what you just did and what you're doing in general in that moment, because you want to call it your calling or whatever, whatever term you want to apply. Think about it. If this is what you're doing for a living, all right, great, you're on a good path. If it's something that you're doing for your neighbor because they think you can help them with this, and you're looking for a career change, you just got your answer.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, listen, there is a place for that person, for that kid that wants it really bad. There's a spot for him.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that kid is not going to be mixing Lady Gaga, but they may be mixing, a church or whatever. They can find a place for themselves that they love and enjoy. Not everyone gets the opportunity to be a world-class mixer. It's really strange. It's like there are, when a new gig comes up, a new artist shows up that blows up, gets huge, all of a sudden, there are, managers that put a call out to find a front of house guy for that artist. Yeah. And there are like 20 people in that list.
That's right.
And I know all of them.
Yep.
And they know me, and it's hard to
They all show up at Scoville's back lounge a couple times a year.
That's it. Yeah, yep. That's it. Yep. So I recognize that I have been lucky and have been blessed to, be included in that small group of people. And it's hard. Like, I try to help kids to get into that opportunity, and it's hard. It's hard to break into that shell.
I mean, that's true in
you can do it. You can.
That's true in any industry, right? If you want to be in the on the A list, the cream of the crop, whatever you call it, you have to have the talent of whatever that is. But again, I call that table stakes, right? That's you got to have that coming in. Yep. You've got to apply yourself. You have to say yes to more opportunities than you think you should. You're going to burn yourself out a little bit getting there, and then one day the phone rings with that opportunity.
That's right.
And you won't necessarily realize it in the moment. You'll see it afterwards if you say yes. But if you say no to that, that's probably it. Like that, that opportunity to prove yourself in that arena happens once.
It does.
And you either do it or you don't. And then life kind of moves on. And that's how life is. Yeah. And it's
luckily it is okay.
If you had said no to Warrant that day, right? Well, I mean, think about this, right? Like there are 100 good reasons why you could and arguably should have said no to Warrant that day, right? The top one is
100%.
I've never done live sound. Like that's an excellent reason for a business that you respect that, comes to you and says, will you do this for us? And you say no, because I am not the right person. I don't have that experience. It's a great, and they would respect you for the rest of their career, but you wouldn't be their front of house engineer.
That's right. That's right. I know.
And, and you didn't know when you said yes to that. You were terrified. Yeah.
Of course.
But
and I also, there's a lesson in that because there have been several times in my career where I've said yes. This is why I always tell younger kids, don't ever say no. Don't ever think that something is beneath you. Because the opportunity that comes from you saying yes will get you to a certain place. After I did Warrant, I did a few other hair bands, Vince Neil and some other band, Firehouse,
Amazing.
and all these other hair bands. And I got an opportunity. Someone called me to be the stage patcher for a Whitney Houston tour. And I said, I don't know, stage patching. I'm a mixer and I'm a producer and a recording engineer. Like, I don't know, if I want to get
that might be beneath you.
Yeah.
I'm using air quotes for those who aren't watching. Yeah.
But I did say yes, and I was like, you know what, I'll go out and do this because I want to learn, what a large stadium tour does, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, long story short, I ended up standing next to a monitor engineer that gets fired, and she, looking at him, goes, "You're out," and looks at me and goes, "You're in." And I was literally just standing there like I'm the stage patcher kid next to the monitor mixer. And she literally went, "You're out," fired him on the spot in the middle of the show and pointed at me and said, "Get in there, kid." And I said, okay. And next thing you know, I'm mixing monitors for Whitney Houston. You know what I mean? And so that opportunity would have never, ever happened had I not taken that job of being a stage patching guy.
Yeah.
And that...
Right place, right time, man.
I got to tell you, man, that resume item on my resume, Whitney Houston, has gotten me jobs to this day.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. So,
of course it has. Yeah.
I'm just telling you, say yes. Don't ever say no. I never said no when I was a kid. Now I say no.
But you've earned that privilege. Right. And you've also built up enough of a reputation and a resume that people understand that you can't. I mean, we all know you can't say yes to everything. You can only be in one place at one time, right? And so it's okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting.
But I still. I mean, it hurts me to say no to this day. Like I'm still like, oh man, they're gonna think I'm a prima donna or something, or they're
that's the entrepreneur's curse.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
it really is. And I mean, to say that I resemble that remark is I live that remark.
Man.
It burns me out sometimes because I say yes to too many things.
I know,
but
me too.
You worry that opportunity that's being presented to you is the last one you're ever going to get. That's the last time the phone's ever going to ring.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
it's a curse, man. You sit there and just go, oh man. Anyway, it's geez, we could go into the whole psychological, imposter syndrome, all that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, well, listen. I figured out a while back, not as far back as I wish I had, that the whole fake it till you make it thing doesn't exist. You just keep faking it. That's it.
Right.
You just keep faking.
That's right.
That's it. Yeah. Don't worry about. Don't worry about the rest. Yeah.
I mean, I can give you an examples of where people have said to me, can you, like as an assistant engineer when I was young and starting out, can you know how to work that piece of gear, don't you? And I've never, ever in my entire life said no. I've always said, oh yeah, no, I know that piece of gear. And then literally like in front of that piece of gear, just going, I'm paging through things going, I don't know what's happening.
That's right. But you learn to say things like, oh, this has a different firmware than I'm used to. Hang on, give me a second.
Totally.
But like, that's a skill right there. You know that you can figure it out,
Yeah.
And you also know that you can talk to the person who's looking over your shoulder while you're figuring it out. That's
right.
That's a skill. I mean, as a music and engineer and computer nerd, that's probably my greatest skill, is talking to people while I'm figuring out the thing that they're paying me to figure out.
It's amazing, man. Some of the things that have happened in my career are hilarious. You know, I had a moment early on in my career as an assistant engineer for a really famous guy. We were doing a commercial, and there was a lot of suits in the room, like a lot of corporate guys. You know, it was a Toyota commercial, I think, or something. So, and it was, you know, very tight, triple scale musicians. You know, full horn section. You know, drums,
Nice.
the whole bit. You know,
Sure.
it was a big time session at Ocean Way in Los Angeles, and so I'm the tape op, and we're recording an overdub to a part, and then we were going to move on to the next section, and I armed the wrong track and blew out, you know, a good 20 seconds of like an important horn section that we'd spent hours like getting right.
There's no undo button in those days.
And I did with the venue console. When it happened, I knew I did it. I couldn't believe it, and yet I let it go for like 20 seconds before I pressed stop. And the engineer, I'll never forget this. This engineer saw what I did. He turned around, saw what I did, and without missing a beat, turns around to the suits and he says, "Hey guys, why don't you go take lunch? It's going to take us a while. It's kind of like Photomat. There's some things we have to develop, some things here in the audio that won't be ready until after lunch. So why don't you, go take a couple hours? It's going to take at least a couple hours. You guys go take a couple hours. We'll do those things here. Musicians out in the room, you guys hang on for a minute. But everyone else, suits guys, why don't you go have lunch?" And they all looked at each other. "Oh, you just got to go develop something. Let's go have lunch." And they walked out the room. And so then the engineer turns to me after they walk out the room and he goes, "Don't ever do that again, dude. I just saved your ass." And then turned to the horn section and said, "All right, guys, we got to fix this one little part," and saved me. Like I never, he didn't have to do that, right? Like he could have pushed stop on the tape machine, turned around and went, "Kid, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. Sorry, guys. This kid just screwed it up. We're going to be here for another couple hours." Instead, he chose to protect me, and I'll never forget that. And I always choose when there's something like that now. When someone else makes a mistake now, I choose to go that route, and I learned a lot that day. And I'd never ever after that day punched into some part of a of a section. It was a huge learning experience. So those kind of things have happened to me in my career, and I've been really lucky to have those things happen.
What a great. Thank you for sharing that. That's and that is an important thing. Is we all do make mistakes.
Yeah,
and when we can offer some grace and some kindness and even some cover at times for the mistakes of others, for the sake of just kind of nobody needed to know, right? Like
that's all it.
Just what was going to be the benefit? It was going to turn the whole session sour if 100%. If he did that to you in that moment. I mean, it wouldn't have changed anything about, like, it's going to need to be re-recorded. Like that is a fact now. That is the world we are now living in, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So why not just roll with it?
Totally.
Yeah. Now, again, do that twice. Whole different story.
Done. Yeah. See ya. I know.
But everybody gets one. Yeah.
But that's also a learning experience for me, right? Ever since then, even to this day, if I'm dealing with tape, I'm super careful about which tracks I'm arming. It like that had a long, lifelong effect.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
In being careful about that kind of stuff. So yeah. Anyway, hey,
Yeah.
I mean, mistakes happen, and I've made a lot of them.
Yep.
And luckily, I've been around people that have, helped me to learn from those mistakes, but also, not destroy my career over it.
Right. Right. And
Yeah,
I'm sure there have been opportunities where you have also chosen not to destroy someone else's career over a
100%.
stupid one time off kind of, just like we are humans. We lose focus. It happens.
That's right.
Yeah.
I know it.
Yeah.
I know it.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
anyway.
Amazing. We didn't get to 90% of the things that I
Sorry.
had on the list. Please don't apologize. That's the best kind. We had a great conversation here. This is absolutely amazing. There's a million things I'd love to ask you. So we'll give it another 6 or 8 months and we'll have you back and we'll nerd out again about some of the nerdier stuff and whatever happens and all that good stuff. So yeah, man.
Cool.
Thank you so much for doing this. What a
thanks for having
blast.
me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Pooch, where can people follow you to find out, what you're up to and I casually mentioned it, but you do have classes and courses that you teach. So tell people where they can find that, especially.
Bunch of things I'm proud of. There's a series that I did with this guy named Chris Raybould, and he's the front house mixer for Bruno Mars. He and I, during the pandemic, started a YouTube channel that is just basically us talking about sound. So if you have any sort of interest in live sound, there's 58 episodes up there of an hour or longer of us just chatting about sound during the pandemic. Go check that out. It's called Pooch and Raybould is the YouTube channel. Pooch and Raybould, Rabold.
Yep.
My masterclass is for sale. You can go to kenpooch.com. Ken is my real name, Ken. kenpooch.com. And there's a masterclass there. It's over 10 hours of instruction about live sound for $100. It's in
amazing
Spanish subtitles, Portuguese subtitles. So we've had since it's been out since 2019. And since it's been out, we've reached, I think, 33 countries or something like that with it.
Amazing.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm very, very proud of that. Another thing I'm proud of is I authored a Berkeley online course called Live Microphone Techniques. So if you want to learn anything and everything about microphones, you can go to that. It's Berkeley online course, so just berkeley.com.
Yep.
And finally, you can find me on social media. Mostly Instagram is where I post these days. FOH_Pooch. FOH_engineer_Pooch at Instagram. And then I think my Facebook is FOH Pooch. So yeah, cool. Just Google me, you'll find all that.
Yeah. Next time I'll ask you where you get your name from, but there you go.
It's a story. There's a story.
I'm sure it is. Of that, I have no doubt, my friend. And we'll link to all of those places in the show notes here at Gig Gab Podcast too. So yeah, you don't have to remember all that, folks. I took notes while Pooch was talking, so it's all going to be linked there in the episode thing. So yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Oh,
thanks for having me. It was great.
What a blast. There are 3 words that we like to say here on Gig Gab, and they kind of mean a lot. If you would be so kind as to say these 3 words as we play the music out, we would love that. So thanks for hanging.
All right, man. Always be performing, guys. Always.
That's it. Thank you, Pooch. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next week. I believe next week, if I've got my math right in my head, is Parthenon Huxley. So another fun one. Good stuff these days. Thanks, Pooch. Thanks, everybody. And that's it. It's that easy.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're a natural, as you know.